Hello everyone, my name is KelSounds, and today I want to show you guys how I made this pluck noise inside of Faceplant. Now let me get rid of these automations. But yeah, it basically sounds like this. And of course I have a FX off and on. All the processing was done inside of Faceplant, so I'm not going to be using any plugins or anything outside of Faceplant. So I have 2 layers here, and then I have some post-processing, which we'll get into. But first, we'll start with making the main pluck sound. And so the first thing that we're going to do is come over here to the envelope and set the release to 500. And then we're going to create some MIDI inside of our DAW. And I had the note set to C1, so I'm going to get that going. I'm just going to divide it here. Let's make a pluck noise. Alright, perfect. And now we can get to the post-processing. And so the first effect that I added was a saturator, and I turned the fuzz all the way down, and then I set the drive to 54%. And then the next thing that I did was added a shaper, and did this kind of shape. Right, I'm going to right click and hit smooth. And I left the drive alone, and I turned down the mix, I think to around like 24%. Then I went ahead and added a snap heap. And so I did something kind of interesting inside of snap heap here. I went ahead and dispersed the signal, but instead of using a regular disperser, I thought it'd be kind of fun to experiment with the MultiPass and disperse with the MultiPass effect. And so I pretty much just added another snap heap. And inside this snap heap, I added a MultiPass. And then I opened the MultiPass. And instead of having 3 lanes, there's going to be 2, but the thing that we're going to be using here is the split frequency band. And so since the disperser effect smears our sound by using all-pass filters, and those all-pass filters are changing the phase relationship of our frequencies, that's pretty much what the MultiPass dynamics is doing. Since it's not using linear phase to separate the signal here, it's actually using minimum phase. And so this split frequency band here is actually changing the phase of our signal, depending where I have it set. And you can't hear it as much now, but when I back out of this and I duplicate it a bunch of times, you can hear it more prominently. And so it kind of creates that dispersion effect. And so yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to experiment with that instead of using a disperser, although it would just be easier to just grab a disperse effect. And so we're going to come inside this multipass and bring the frequency split all the way down here. Then we're going to go to macro 1 and modulate it, so that way we can control it. And then we're going to exit out of that into our snap heap, come over here to macro 1 and modulate the macro 1 inside of the multipass. And then I pretty much just duplicated this maybe like 5 times. And so now it creates the dispersion effect. And I went ahead and put these in a group so I can show you the differences with a dispersion and then with the multipass. So with the dispersion effect, actually you can kind of hear it more inside of the disperser effect. And then the multipass group, if I duplicated a bunch more, I don't know if that's going to be good for my CPU. Actually, screw it. Let's just do something crazy here and duplicate it a bunch of times until my computer crashes. Okay, alright, yeah. Alright, Alright, and since I can't modulate more than 14, and actually I just remembered, I read this on the Kilohertz blog, if you do want to have more modulations here for the macro, because on the macro you can only have 14, you can use a remap utility. And so how that would work, I'm just going to go completely off topic here for a little bit, just to show you guys this cool little trick that I seen on the blog. So I just deleted that group. I'm going to make a new group and put a MultiPass inside of there, just do everything that I did the first time. Alright, so I have my original setup. Then I come over here to the remap and I modulate the macro 1, duplicate this 14 times. Then I grab another remap once I run out of modulations and I modulate the remap. So I hit the equal sign over here. Then I come over here to the last MultiPass. I duplicate it, and instead of modulating it to the first one, I double click so I can get rid of that modulation. I go ahead and do the same thing. I just modulate the macro knob, then I can duplicate this 14 times. I know this is a little bit ridiculous, but it's just for experimental purposes. And once I decide, you know what, I think that's enough MultiPass effects, and I come over here to macro 1, and I modulate the third remap. As you can see, my CPU is it's spiking up a little bit because of so many MultiPass effects. But yeah, I know it's a little bit ridiculous, just kind of something fun to do, and I thought it was interesting. The Kilohertz website has a bunch of tips and tricks that you can learn from, and I thought this was pretty useful. It's kind of funny too, because it's like, you're not going to really need that many effects modulated to one macro. But yeah, that's how you do that, to have it set to one macro instead of using multiple ones. Okay, so back to the topic at hand, creating the Pluck. So yeah, I guess you can consider this a lighter effect of the dispersion. So anyways, I have the same setup here. Duplicate it. And then I set the macro knob to around like 33%. Alright, perfect. And so that was pretty much all I did inside of that snap heap, so I'm just going to close that. And the next thing that I added was a filter. Then I came down here to the modulators area, added a envelope, and then did this kind of shape with it. I'm going to go ahead and right click the decay and set it to 1000. I'm going to set the cutoff to 25. And then for the envelope, I'm going to modulate the cutoff. So I'm going to right click and hit 80. Then I went ahead and grabbed another MultiPass and did some upwards compression with a dynamic snap-in on the highs of the sound. I'm going to move the split band to around like 2000 kilohertz. Looking at the signal here, I think I'm going to set this to -25 and have the release going down a little bit. That's a faster release. I'm going to right click the ratio and hit 4. And so it's a little bit too much for my liking, so I'm going to go ahead and right click the mix and hit 50%. Alright, that's perfect. And I think I'm going to set the decay to a little bit longer. Like 1.24. And then I'm probably going to come back up here to the filter and adjust the cutoff. Now I'm going to record this sample and export it. I'm going to come over here and insert an audio track, rename this C1, and now I'm just going to record the sample. Do a little bit of editing here. I'm going to consolidate it. Come over here inside the audio, double click this. Okay, and I'm going to export it and make a new MIDI track. I'm going to grab my faceplant just to kind of get things set up here. I'm going to hit new, and then I'm going to hit sampler. And now I'm going to import my sample. Then I'm just going to make a MIDI note here and make it C1. And as you can hear, it's way too low because it's at C4. And if I set it to C1, it's too high. So I'm going to right click and hit C2. That sounds more like our sample. Now that we have our sample imported and everything ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and set our lanes first. So the first lane should be going to lane 3, and lane 2 should also be going to lane 3. And I'm going to rename our group to main sound. And then I'm going to come over here to the envelope and set the release to 500. And then I'm also going to set the polyphony to 1, so that way there's not multiple notes playing, since it is a bass noise. And then also, for our envelope, I'm going to send this to lane 1, so this will be coming straight to this lane. And I'm also going to add our second group here. So actually, instead of making a new group, I'm just going to Control D on this first group, and then rename this to +24, and set the semitones set to right-click and hit 24. So that's like 2 octaves up. And the release is also going to stay the same. And for our macro 1, we're going to come up here and rename this frequency. And then for our +24 layer, we're going to want to turn on unison, because this sound's going to be spread out. Then I'm also going to add a filter, make it a high pass filter. I'm going to set the cutoff to 700, and I'm going to bring the Q up a little bit. I went ahead and grabbed the MIDI that I was using for the demo, so it's not just the C1 note playing. Alright, so we're getting closer to our sound, as you can hear. And so we're not finished with our +24 layer. For the detune, we're going to right-click and... oh, it's already set at 25, so we're just going to leave that alone. And then for our spread, we're going to hit 50%. And now we're going to modulate both the detune and the spread. So I'm going to come over here to the frequency, modulate the detune, right-click, and hit 30. And then I'm going to do the same for the spread. I'm going to right-click, and instead of 30, I'm going to hit 10. Perfect. And that is pretty much it for the generator section. Alright, so now we're going to come down here to the modulator section and add a envelope. I'm going to make this kind of shape, come over here to the decay and hit 200. Then I'm going to come to the first lane and add a filter. And so the envelope is going to be modulating the filter, and the filter is going to be for the main sound. And so I'm going to right click the cutoff of the filter and hit 67. And then for the envelope, I'm going to modulate the cutoff, right click and hit 35. And then actually for the decay, I'm going to turn it up a little bit, so probably like almost around 300. So now I'm going to come over here to the frequency and modulate the cutoff. And so for the cutoff of the filter, I'm going to right click and hit 20. And so that way the frequencies of the first sound are just being filtered out a little bit. Alright, perfect. Okay, so we're going to close our main sound, then come over here to our +24 layer, come down here to the envelope, make sure the send to is being sent to lane 2. Now we're just going to Control duplicate this filter, and we're going to bring it to lane 2. And so now it's going to be filtering our second layer here, except for the second filter, our values are going to be a little bit different. And so for the first one, I'm going to right click and hit 40. And then for the second modulation, I'm going to right click and also hit 40. So that way our second layer, there is more frequencies coming through when we turn up the frequency macro knob. And I'm also going to add the effects here as well. So I'm going to come to macro 2, call this effects. And then I'm going to add a snap heap, turn the mix all the way down, modulate the mix. There we go. Then we're going to come inside the snap heap and add a dual delay and set the time to synchronization. Leave it at 3/16 and have this at 1.70. Turn the mix up all the way. Oh, whoops. Don't forget to turn the effects on. And then we're going to do parallel processing. So hit this on the bottom, turn this down a little bit. I'm going to right click and actually do -12. Then I also added a filter. So I'm just going to come over here, add the filter snap in, do a high shelf shape. Then I'm going to adjust the cutoff. The gain, I think I set to like 7. And the cutoff, we can have set to like 2000 hertz. Then I added another filter and did a high pass. going to right click and hit 500 Hertz. And then to bring out the effect even more, of course I added a dynamics and did some upwards compression. So looking at the signal, I'm going to set it to -15, set the release down a little bit, then come over here to the ratio and hit 4. And so since that's a little bit too much for me, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the mix. Alright, so I think I like it set at maybe like 35%. And so that's pretty much it for the snap heap. Now we can come over here and turn the effect off and on. Okay, so now for the final processing, I'm going to go ahead and add a shaper table. Come over here to the wave shaping distortion folder and hit tension. And I had the wavetable set to around 145. So I'm going to right click, 145. And since it's a little loud, I adjusted the mix down to around 50%. And now we're going to add our best friend, OTT. So I just used kilohertz OTT instead of making our own. So I just come over here inside of their presets, come to the dynamics folder and hit NOTT. And I always like to do this thing where I have like 2 OTTs. So the first mix is going to be set at 40. Then I'm going to duplicate it and set the second mix to 20. I'm going to rename this group OTT. And as you can hear, when we have the frequency set all the way down, you can hear this buzzing. And I don't mind it when the frequency is turned up all the way and the effects is on. But it can be a little bit annoying when it's being turned down. So what I did to kind of fix that was I added a new group and called this to cut highs. And inside this group, I added a snap heap, came down to the modulator section of the snap heap and put down an envelope, made this kind of shape. And I think I set it around there to 144. Then I grabbed a filter, set the cutoff to around 300. Then for our envelope, I went ahead and modulated the cutoff and I hit 30. And then for the envelope, you're going to want to come down here to the trigger input, right click and hit always trigger from note on. So that way the MIDI note triggers the envelope. And then I went ahead and modulated the mix of the snap heap. So I'm going to come over here to frequency, come over here to mix, turn the modulation all the way down. And so that way, as we turn up the frequency, we get the full sound. And then when we turn down the frequency, we don't get that buzzing anymore. And then of course for the last thing, I added a limiter. And I didn't really mess with this too much, except for turn up the gain a little bit. So I'm going to right click and hit 4. Alright, and that's perfect. That is the preset. Just going to organize this envelope group really quickly. Bring this over here, put the envelope in the group. So yeah, that is the preset. So yeah, it's a little fun bass pluck. Alright, so this preset's going to be available for free on my blog post. The link will be in the description. And I'm also going to release the sample that we made in the beginning, if you guys just want to like import it instead of having to make it. So yeah, I'm going to leave the preset available for download and the sample. And that is the sound. I hope you guys enjoyed. And I will see you in the next one. Adios.